Welcome to Aging Well with your co-host Alice Liu. Today we have a very accomplished guest, Dr. Carrie McAiney. Dr. McAiney is the Schlegel Research Chair in Dementia at the Schlegel UW Institute for Aging, otherwise known as the RIA, and University of Waterloo. Welcome to the show. Can you briefly share your background and what drew you to dementia care and community engagement?
Sure. So I've been doing research in dementia for about 30 years. I was at the University of Waterloo for all of my degrees. And through that time, when I initially was doing my undergraduate degree, I wasn't really exposed to dementia. It wasn't until I started my graduate work. And as soon as that began, I really fell in love with aging and with dementia. I've had different people that I've worked with and different mentors that have really helped to shape my career. So I can recall, many years ago, actually, at a conference. It was an Alzheimer's Society of Canada conference, and there was a colleague of mine who had a person with dementia speak at the conference, and that was the first time I had seen that happen, and it really just shifted the way I thought about research and the way I thought about teaching. And since then have really worked to engage and work with people living with dementia and family members in the research that I do. And then in terms of, that does relate to engagement and community engagement, but I've also had other mentors that I've worked with, particularly a geriatric psychiatrist many years ago who was really interested in education and service development. And from him, I learned a lot about how to engage different people in the community and how important it is to do that if you want to have something that's going to be relevant and meaningful and useful for the community. So it's been, mainly because of these different people that I've had these experiences, and it shaped the way I look at things in my career.
Yeah, it's so great that you've had so many inspirational people in your life.
Yes, absolutely.
So why is it that you focus specifically on dementia care instead of, for example, finding a cure?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Of course, we want to find a cure. We want to be able to prevent dementia. If it develops, we want to find cures to help people to live differently with dementia. And there's a lot of amazing research that is happening and wonderful researchers that are working in those areas. But at the same time that work is going on, we have in Canada, hundreds of thousands of people living with dementia. And so we need to find ways to support those individuals and to help them live their best lives. And so I think that opportunity to work directly with people with dementia and have those impacts is really what drew me to the area that I'm in.
That sounds really great. What are the biggest challenges facing individuals with dementia and their caregivers today?
Yeah, it's a really good question as well. And you know, I think a lot of it comes down to stigma. And that's because stigma has so many different impacts. So stigma really comes about. So it's that idea that we see people in a different kind of way, often a negative way. And it often comes about because we don't understand. So there's a lack of understanding about dementia and its impacts. People often have a certain view of it. They often think of people later in the dementia journey. And so because of that lack of understanding, then that can lead people, first of all, if they are worried, they might be seeing changes that are happening in themselves or in their family members. They might delay getting help, finding out about what those changes seem to be about, like what's happening. And that can lead to delays in diagnoses. And when we don't have a diagnosis, even though we don't have a lot of treatments, the treatments we do have, as well as supports and services that are available, people often can't access them. And so the other thing that happens is once you have a diagnosis and the stigma still exists, then people can be reluctant to reach out for help because they don't want other people to know that either they themselves or someone in their family may be living with dementia. So it has these all of these negative implications, and it causes a lot of stress and discomfort and pain for people because they are dealing not only with the condition but also with maybe feelings of fear and shame about this condition and not getting help that can be available to them. And so I think that's why stigma is really a big issue. If we start to deal with that, then it can help with all of these other aspects and other implications that stigma leads to.
In that case, what would you say we can do to educate ourselves and our loved ones better about dementia? And also on a more societal level, what do you think we can do to combat stigma?
Yeah. So, the fact that you're doing one of your shows on dementia is an example of something that's a great way to get information out to the public about dementia. So, for the audience members out there, it's, engaging in these types of discussions and conversations, reading about dementia as well. Obviously, the Alzheimer's Society um, of Canada and then locally as well, they have wonderful resources and information available on their websites. And at the RIA, we also have some great information about dementia. And I can talk about different projects if you're interested in me doing that. Um, so I think education, getting the word out, and also having an opportunity to see and connect with people living with dementia. Um, as I mentioned before, people often think about dementia in one way, but it's a journey. It's something that progresses over time. And so in the earlier stages of dementia, people, it can be difficult to even know that somebody has dementia. So they can be and can often continue to be really engaged in the community and in their families. And so when you have opportunities to see people with dementia and they're doing things like everybody else does, it really, I think, gets you to question some of those assumptions you have about what dementia means and what it looks like. And so, I think that education, especially when it's combined, either provided by or done in conjunction with a person with dementia, I think can really have big impacts at a societal level.
Yes, wow, it's really important that people know what to look for and that dementia is not a one size fits all.
Yeah,
So, what does person-centered care mean for people living with dementia?
so person-centered care means that we look at people as individuals. So we think about what their individual needs are, what their preferences are, what their values are. And that should be the case no matter if a person has dementia or if they don't. So we really want to really understand the person and to tailor our care around their specific needs and circumstances. Now, as dementia progresses, that can be more challenging, but it doesn't mean that we should stop trying to do that. Right? So we may need to look at different ways to understand what a person's preferences are, to give them choice in the type of care or in different decisions that they've got available to them. And then, of course, as the dementia continues to progress, then really focusing on family and involving family can be helpful. Might not be exactly what a person might, their preferences and how the family sees the individual and what they want might not be exactly the same as how the person would see it. But you're likely to get closer to that by working with the family.
So, it sounds like person-centered care in general is very important, right? How can communities become more dementia friendly?
So I think their education is really the key. So we have that opportunity at a personal level to learn more about dementia, and that can, again, make us challenge our assumptions and help to reduce stigma. And on a community level as well, it can help people to feel more accepted. So we know of circumstances where maybe a person with dementia wants to go to a certain club or a certain organization or a certain type of program, and they might be ineligible just because they have dementia. Now, if we were able to offer programs that are adapted, and more better aligned for people with dementia, and that are offered by individuals that have some training in dementia, then people are going to feel a lot more accepted, and they'll have a lot more opportunities to that they can access as well. So I think, again, education really is key because it trickles down to so many different aspects.
So you mentioned programs adapted for or for people with dementia. This is a little related to that. Can you share an example of a successful community initiative supporting those with dementia?
Sure. So I'll touch on one or two. Um, so an educational initiative that we've been doing more recently at the RIA is something called Forward with Dementia. And so this is a website that has been developed. It started actually as an international research project, and then we did some adaptation, some additional work in Canada with funding from the Public Health Agency of Canada. And so this website, it provides information and resources and stories about people living with dementia and family members. And it's been developed together with people with dementia and with families and with health and social care providers as well. And some of the recent additions that we've made to this website is um, we've been able to take resources and adapt them for different ethno-racial communities. And so we work together with mainly family members from the Chinese community, the South Asian community, and the Italian community. And we adapted resources to make them more culturally appropriate for each of those groups. And then once our teams were happy with the content, then we translated those resources into different languages. And we did, part of this was because we knew that there was a huge gap in terms of resources that were first available in different languages, but more importantly, I think, adapted so that they took into account the beliefs and traditions and values of those different communities. And so it incorporated those things with the content so that when people are reading them, they see themselves more in those resources, and we think that that's going to be really beneficial for them. So that's a one example of something that we've been doing that we think has had a benefit to the broader community.
Wow, that's so interesting. I wouldn't have thought about it right away, but it makes sense that you do need to adapt for different cultures. People come from different places, they have different upbringings.
Exactly. You think about things like um, how people see responsibility to care for their elders within their communities. That can differ quite a bit, and so to be able to then incorporate some of that into the resources. So it's if you're reading something that's not adapted, you might say, well, that's not going to work in our family, right?
Mhm.
If it's been adapted, it's likely that it'll be more relevant to individuals in different communities, and then hopefully they'll actually put things into place.
So we touched on this a little bit, but what role do family and caregivers play, and how can we better support them?
It's hard to underestimate how important family members are. They're just essential to people living with dementia, and it's on a number of different levels. So, for the person with dementia, they are their support person, right? They provide that day-to-day assistance and support. What that looks like is going to change over time. So initially, it might be that they're just the family's there to serve as a reminder, reminding people to do certain things. Um, they may likely become the driver in the house and take the individual with dementia to appointments and so on. And then obviously, as time goes on, there'll be more and more responsibilities and more care that will be needed to be provided by family members. So they play a big role there. They're also big advocates for people living with dementia. And this is especially important in care situations. If you're in the family doctor's office, but also, or if they're in the hospital or, even in a long-term care home, family members can, be that advocate to make sure that the person is getting the care that they need and getting any issues addressed. So one of the things, though, that happens with this responsibility is that it can be really stressful for caregivers and for family members. And so we know from decades of research that caregivers of people living with dementia can have impacts in terms of their physical health, their mental health, social health, and financial health. And so it's recognizing that there are these consequences to caregiving. And so if we're another member of the family, not the primary person, or if we're a friend or a neighbor, it's really, I think, trying to do whatever we can to support both the person with dementia and the family member. That could be making them a meal, cutting their grass, spending time with them, because that the social aspect is so important, and it really becomes very difficult for family members to maintain that social connection. So doing what we can to have that connection with individuals, giving them a break, just that time away so they can do things on their own, or just to rest, or to, get their hair done, go to appointments that they have. So one of the things that can happen is that families sometimes may they say, oh, I don't really need help, right? They might, try to say it's okay, that's all right. Um, but it's having them accept that it's okay to say yes to offers of help. So it might take a little bit of work, but I think wherever we can do that, it'll be a benefit for both the person with dementia and the family member.
I do hope more people realize that in order to also give your best care, you need to take care of yourself.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And then we actually use that argument sometimes with people, right? Because they're so dedicated to,
hmm
providing that care. But they have to be able to take care of themselves if they're going to be able to do that.
hmm what innovations or models of dementia care do you find most promising?
So I've mentioned a couple of times this idea, and I don't know if I've used the term yet, but we call it co-design, where we work together with, in this case, people living with dementia and family members, and often others, to develop or design interventions or programs or resources for people with dementia and family members. So we have the person with dementia and their family involved in the whole process. And we do that because we know that what gets produced at the end is going to be more relevant for the person, and more likely to be accepted by them and used by them. And so, I mentioned the Forward with Dementia work, that was all co-designed. Another, I guess, initiative that we've been working on, led by some of my colleagues and I, Laura Middleton, Heather Keller, and I, is something called Delight. And this is a lifestyle intervention program that's quite innovative. In a big part because it is something that's been developed by and for people with dementia. So we've worked with them to determine what's the main goal of this intervention, what are the different components, how should it be offered, and delivered. And so the overall goal of Delight is to enhance well-being for people living with dementia. And you know, the focus is on enhancing lifestyle. So it includes physical activity, nutrition, social connection, mental well-being, and a focus on sleep as well. And so it's a program that we've been testing out. We run it when it runs, it's 8 weeks in length, 2 times a week, and it includes all of those different components. And we there's not as much research, but there's growing research on the benefits of things like exercise and nutrition and social connection for people with dementia. But when you look out there in the community, there's often not a lot of options. And so that's why this was developed. And we've been offering it in different places, in person and virtually, and more recently have been adapting it for different communities as well. So I think that this is a really promising approach and opportunity, and we're hoping to see it continue to grow.
That sounds like a wonderful initiative. So, where do you see dementia care and community engagement heading in the next 10 years? What excites you the most?
Okay, yeah, great question. Um, and I guess I'll often think about these things together. More and more we've been seeing this type of co-design work happening, and I think it will continue. I hope it will continue because, again, our experience is that what comes out at the end is better, and it's going to be, more useful, more relevant for people with dementia. So we want that to continue. Um, and so the more we can do that and then develop different types of resources and programs that are specific for people with dementia, that would be bad, that would be fantastic. Um, we sometimes will say that, if you develop something for a person with dementia, then it's likely going to be something that's well suited for anyone. Right? So, it's probably not likely that we're going to have every type of program available specific for dementia. And you think about, across the province or across the country, you've got, obviously the urban areas, but you've got a lot of rural areas where the numbers are a lot smaller. So let's think about what we can do, again, that can benefit people living with dementia, but then that will also have benefits for others. So I think just trying to do more and more where we're designing in a way where we're thinking about the individuals with dementia and what's going to allow them to have success.
That's actually such a great way of putting it, that it's not just going to benefit people with dementia, but people in general. It
Exactly.
sounds like the future is really bright, so that's great.
Let's hope so.
If there's one message you would like to share with our viewers, one final message, what would it be?
Going to be benefit for each individual. It can help to address that stigma we have and maybe make us a little bit less fearful because fear is a common feeling. And then along with that is understanding that people can live and live well with dementia. Um, what that looks like, again, might be different than a person without dementia, and it might change over time. So we often talk about, how do we support people with dementia to live their best lives? And that can be in small little things that are done, those small connections that we make with people, um, things that we know are really, really meaningful and important. People with dementia need the same things we all need. They need purpose, they need love, they need connection. So, how can we find different ways to do that? So, if you're meeting a person with dementia or someone or a family member, maybe think about those types of things and how you might be able to create those opportunities.
Well, those are two really great final messages. Thank you so much again, Carrie, for taking the time out of your busy schedule for this incredibly eye-opening conversation.
Well, thanks very much, Alice. I really appreciated it. And it was great to chat with you.
This has been Aging Well with your co-host Alice Liu and our wonderful guest, Dr. Carrie McAiney.